Hi everybody, this is Dr. Lachlan Crawford here at Daru Wellness, ready for the fall reset. And today we're talking about how to minimize your workplace anxiety. And I actually want to expand this talk a little bit beyond workplace anxiety because maybe that doesn't apply to everybody, but it's really about managing workplace and work time expectations and stress, and just making sure that the coping mechanisms that we have are an equal match to the level of demands and stress that we have on a day-to-day level, so that we avoid things like burnout, which now as of 2019 is actually a medical condition according to the World Health Organization. And burnout is actually increasing in incidence, people reporting burnout being, a very extreme level of soul depression, of just feeling like they can't do what they're doing anymore. So they have a lot of mental and emotional, physical symptoms. So like I said, extreme depression, apathy, lethargy, irritability, lack of motivation, coupled with a lot of physical conditions, so chronic disease, a higher incidence of autoimmune conditions and physical pain. So we want to obviously avoid burnout. And the way that we do that is we manage our day-to-day stress now, before we get to that point. So we don't want to even approach that. We want to manage our symptoms now. So I'm going to talk about 4 things that you can do. Just 4 categories of things that you can keep your mind on a day-to-day basis. Just make sure that you're checking in on these things, maybe weekly or monthly, to make sure that you're not, veering off in any direction of feeling like your stress demands are actually more than your coping mechanisms are. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is knowing your level of stress. This is around your work, but this can be about any part of your life. Actually checking in and knowing the level of stress that you have is so important to know when you actually need an intervention, when you need to reach out for help, and when you actually just need a bit of self-care, or when you're actually like, okay, I'm actually good with the level that I'm at. Congratulations, pat yourself on the back and keep going. So you need to know your level so that you can gauge your sustainability of the pace that you're at. So one of the first things that you can do is check in on your physical symptoms. Do I have nervousness when I think about work? Do I have, constipation or diarrhea when I have like a big work thing the next morning? Am I having any kind of chronic pain? Am I having sleeplessness? Am I having behavioral patterns around work events or life events where you're actually avoiding things, you're avoiding socializing around things, you're saying no to work events, you're avoiding presentations, you're avoiding travel, you're avoiding, public speaking, things like that. If you're over preparing for work, if you have a presentation the next day and you're spending an exorbitant amount of time preparing for the presentation, that can be a really big drain on your resources, just because you're feeling really anxious maybe about a presentation or something at work. So just checking in on those symptoms, making sure that you're actually aware of your own patterns. Like I said, physical patterns and mental emotional patterns around that. And a good question to ask yourself is, if this went on forever, how would that feel? So say you're in a really stressful period of time at work, and you say, if this went on forever, I would not be able to cope. That means you need to put in some implementation of some plan now, to make sure that when you come out the other side, you're not burnt out and you're not feeling really demotivated and depressed. And if this went on forever and actually I'd be okay, I think this is a sustainable level of stress for me right now, then you know that your coping mechanisms are matching with the level of stress. So it's a good question to ask, is if this went on forever, the foreseeable future, the forever, then you want to be able to check in on that. So the second category that I'm going to talk about is the basics of self-care. And this we talk about in basically the management of any kind of condition. But some of the most important ones for daytime work, anxiety, and stress. I'm going to talk about blood sugar balance. That's really huge. So I've talked about this before, but having a good breakfast with a good amount of fat and protein. I really like to aim for at least 20 grams of protein in the morning. So that's like a full scoop of protein powder. It's at least 3 eggs in the morning. It's a good amount of eggs. And eggs are not bad for you unless you have a sensitivity to it. So just checking in with your own sensitivities. And having a good fat with your breakfast really helps balance blood sugar levels all day, so that you don't have a crash midday, and that's when you feel really jittery and shaky and hungry and kind of irritable, and that's when you reach for a second coffee just to get through the day. So having stable blood sugar levels throughout the day is really helpful. And checking in on your coffee consumption. I never want to take coffee away from someone if you really love it, but just checking in and making sure that you're not using coffee to get through the day, and then it's actually rebounding and making you not be able to sleep at night, and you feel really jittery in the afternoon. So checking in and just making sure that if you are having a lot of coffee, maybe switch to half calf or green tea, or just decreasing the number of cups that you have. Sleep and exercise are really huge for self-care. Obviously, when we can fit it in, I really love scheduling an exercise into my week as if it's a really important meeting, and it's something that I can't miss because I know it's for my own mental health. And I like to use that analogy for my patients and say, this is a really important meeting for you to get to. This 20-minute walk at your lunchtime is really helpful. Another thing I really love to build into a work week when I talk about stress with my patients is actually building in some meditations in your workday. So if you go to mindful.org, it's a really great resource for guided meditations that are short or long. You can do them at work. They're like 3 or 4 minutes or all the way up to 20 minutes. You can close the door at work if you just have a minute to yourself. At work, do this, just a couple times a week and just see how it feels. But it's a really great way to ground yourself, gather your resources, take a breath, reestablish a parasympathetic balance in your day to really bring down your anxiety, and then you can go off in your day again. It only takes a couple minutes, and it actually really does make a big difference. So again, go to mindful.org and you can check those out. Just try it a couple times. The last thing for self-care basics is just make sure that you're actually looking into if you have any nutritional deficiencies, or if your diet isn't working for you, if you have any food sensitivities. Those things can really trigger anxiety and stress in the middle of your day, even if you don't have digestive symptoms or skin symptoms or anything else. Sometimes food sensitivities and nutritional deficiencies, they can come out as mental health symptoms. So anxiety, panic, worry, sleeplessness, and depression. So just checking in and making sure that you're actually getting the nutrition that you need and that you're supplementing appropriately. And that's when you would come in and talk to one of us about, are you getting everything that you need? So it's the second category is the self-care basics. So first is check in with yourself. Second is self-care basics. And the third one that's really important for work and our own expectations and the things that we commit to in our lives is setting boundaries. This one is a little tough, and I really love having conversations about it because sometimes it requires a little bit of troubleshooting. How do I make this work for my own life? It doesn't work to just say no all the time, of course, especially at work, but making sure that, if somebody asks us to take on another task or change a deadline or do something that is, it requires us to say yes or no, if we can take a second and say, I'll get back to you, and just check in and say, I'll get back to you in an hour. If that's an okay thing for you to say within your expectations of your work, it gives you a little bit of time to really check in with yourself and make sure that that's a realistic thing for you to be able to say yes to. And so again, realistic is the best word for that. And you can actually use that word when you go back. If you need to say to a person, that's not realistic for me to do right now, how about this other timeline, or how about this other person to take on that task? Using the word realistic is really helpful because people don't think that you were saying no just out of no reason. So saying maybe, giving people a deadline or a time when you'll get back to them. And then another piece that you can use for boundaries is giving yourself the permission to really turn off when you're not at work. So having reasonable boundaries around when you are going to answer emails, when you're going to be beholden to your responsibilities at work outside of work time. And if you have the type of job where you do need to be on email, that's fine, but just having really clear boundaries about when you will and when you won't. If you need to be able to answer work up until 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., that's fine, but then give yourself a little bit of time in the evening when you really shut off and you can put your phone on airplane mode and you can actually just completely detach from the rest of the day and maybe do another meditation, maybe relax a little bit, go for an evening walk. So again, taking the time to give yourself permission to shut off outside of work is really helpful for calming that and having the separation between work and home life. And the last thing for boundaries is actually making sure, checking in with yourself, that you actually are seeing the results of your hard work. I mentioned before that burnout is more common if you are working really hard and you're not seeing the results. So if you feel like you're putting a lot of effort into something and you're not getting anywhere with it, or you're not getting the response, or the project isn't going where you want it to go, that's the quickest way to burnout, is if you feel like you don't have control or results. So making sure that you are seeing results of the work that you're putting in and you actually are getting recognition that you're doing it, or at least that you have some sort of control over your ability to choose where you're putting your effort in and where you're putting your time in is really important. So just checking in and making sure that your boundaries aren't being overstepped. You're able to say no or propose a different timeline or propose a different person, propose something that's reasonable, and making sure that you're seeing the results and the trajectory in your effort that is really important. So that's around boundaries, and that can take some troubleshooting, like I said. So coming in and chatting with someone, or chatting with your partner, chatting with your friends, just making sure that you are having appropriate boundaries for yourself within the workplace is really helpful. And the very last thing, I'll make this very quick, is that it's really helpful to know your resources when you're at work. So if your employer has a mental health policy, if you have a policy of stress leave, or illness leave, make sure that you know it. Make sure that you go in and you chat with the HR person, or just know the past history of people, if they've ever had mental health issues, or just stress issues, or a parent gets sick, or something needs to be taken care of. What is in place for you, and what resources do you have, so that you can have peace of mind to know that there's something there for you. If you are self-employed, set something up for yourself, whether it's officially through an insurance program, or whether it's just you have a team of people that you can reach out to. Make sure that you have an ND or an MD or a counselor, somebody that you have a relationship with, that you can talk to. Even if you don't see them all that regularly right now, if you're feeling good and you're feeling fine, like check in with them every 6 months, just have somebody there so that they know you, they know your history, so that when something happens and you feel like you need something now, right? Because that happens when you're in crisis mode, or your anxiety peaks, you feel like, oh no, now's not the time to just start seeing someone new. Maybe it takes a lot of effort to go and to start a whole new professional relationship with somebody. So have somebody that you have a trusting relationship with, that you can go to and you feel comfortable with, and just have them in your back pocket. And likewise with knowing your workplace policy. So those are 4 things I really like to establish for somebody if they're struggling with workplace or daytime anxiety, or just stress levels in general, is know your level of stress, check in with your body, check in with your patterns, and journal. Establish the basics of self-care, so diet, sleep, exercise, stress management, meditations, checking in on your coffee, making sure your supplementation is appropriate, and check in on nutritional deficiencies if you need to. Establish boundaries, make sure that you're really working on that and checking in on yourself, and if you're feeling like your workload is realistic for you. And the last piece is know your resources and create resources if you need to outside of work. So that's everything. Of course, you can individualize this. I love to talk with people about, really customizing their work plan and working with their specific demands. So if you want to come in and become a VIP of the program and talk about how to manage your daytime stress with myself or any of the other practitioners, we're all here to support you. Congratulations on doing the fall reset. It's a fantastic thing to be doing. You're going to be off on the right foot in September. So keep it up. And I wish you a very successful and motivated and sustainable fall. Thanks so much for watching.